Composite Gloves here, and this is another Sounds Like video, and it's probably one day going to become a much bigger series, but today we're just going to look at basic rhythmic patterns in FL, and we're going to look at two sides of it. We're going to be looking at first just general patterns, general rhythms, basic rhythms, just so you have an idea sort of what you're doing, and then we're going to look at sort of drop sound design type rhythms because there is a big difference between them, and getting started it can be kind of difficult understanding what you don't know or understanding sort of the different ideas behind creating these rhythms. So first we're just going to go with our percussion right now, and see, now this is like a whole field of study. It usually goes hand in hand with music theory, but we're just going to look at some basic things. So first let's check out our grid. Now in my FL How to Make Your First Song in FL Studios tutorial series, I talk a bit about the grid in the sequencer video, I believe, and I talk about how it's broken up into measures. So we have these lines here, and they get darker, and then there's these really dark lines, and then there's somewhat light lines. So what this is this is one measure. From 1 to 2 on the grid line, this is a measure. And we'll see that we have these 4 not so dark lines, and these are our beats. So here's beat 1, there's beat 2. Here, let's make it that. That's beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. And then each one of these has another 4 beats inside them. And these can be broken up in 2 ways. So these are called 16th notes because there's 16 of them in one measure. But we're going to focus mostly on 8th notes and big notes, quarter notes is what these are. Don't worry about the music theory side too much. I do have a tutorial series on it, but let's really quick just look at some basic fundamentals so that even if you know no music theory, this will work out for you. So most music, and I'm going to be talking strictly in common time or 4/4, which is what this is. There's 4 beats in one measure. So in most music, there is some sort of backbone. There are certain beats that get the emphasis and other beats do not. I'm going to stay away from counting out loud, like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 in, because I'm not sure how many of you know what that is. But that is a thing, and if I were to do a more in-depth series, it would be talking about that. But essentially, it's all about your vision. So first, you got to decide what kind of songs you want to make, because your style of composition is going to change dramatically. Like, are you going to make a classical fugue or some sort of sonata? Or are you going to go for like an EDM cinematic drop? Or are you going to go for your chill hip-hop backbeat type deal? So all these things will influence the way you approach this. And in each one of those styles, with the exception of some mostly just theoretical ideas, not extraordinarily popular music, there will be a backbeat, something that gets emphasis. So normally it'll be like 1 and 2. So beats 1 and beats 3 are ones, or usually beats 3 and beats 2 and beats 4. So these are called your upbeats, beats 2 and beats 4. And then beats 1 and 3 are called your downbeats. So that's a thing. And there's all sorts of other time signatures, but I guarantee you almost all dance music is in 4/4 when it comes to EDM. There may be exceptions out there. And in fact, there are totally exceptions out there with people who are very knowledgeable about what they're doing. But so if we go over to our pattern editor here, we can begin to look at some basic patterns. And I'm just going to stick to the basic sounds in FL. So these are the 4 that load up by default. And you'll notice that we have 4 beats, and they turn from, here's beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4, and they turn different colors as we go along, and they have 4 in each one, so there's 16 notes, so it's exactly how our sequencer looks. So that is really nifty. So there's a basic beat of 1 and 2, so this is like your house beat, and this is something else that goes hand in hand with tempo. So you may want to be wary of what your tempo is like, because, for example, 110 is a typical tempo for glitch hop. It's just the rhythms that fall into that section are going to work out. And I didn't really spend too much time talking about how tempo interacts with our rhythm, but that also becomes very important as we go. So depending on the instruments you're writing for, this is just a lot of information that I have to tell you before we really get started. Depending on the instruments you're writing for will change your rhythmic style. For example, you would not write a melody for a flute the same way you would write a drum part. They're just different, and so they require different sort of rhythmic nuances, and you could treat them the same, and that could be pretty cool, but generally they have their own thing going on. So for drum beats, usually you really want to have your kick on the beats that emphasize have the emphasis, but there's all sorts of theories about this. You really could do whatever you want, but generally beats 1 and 3 are a common one, and you generally want to focus around some sort of series. So we could write our hat line to do something, so we could have it hit on the, so we have our, right now we have this, let me switch to pattern mode, which is fine, and we could have a hat line that does all the eighth notes, and we're not going to put, so okay, let's just write this in first. There's just so much going through my head because this stuff is stuff I sort of just do, and we're not going to have, so we have every other one, so it's eighth notes. Essentially we have it like this. So if we were to, it's like that, and one right there, and one right there, and one right there, and so on and so forth. So we're going to get rid of the ones where our kick is, so that our kick will come through. That has nothing to do with rhythm. I just don't want it where that is. So another thing that people, when they're getting into like rhythms, like maybe they've got like a boop, tickety pop, boom, boom, and they have like this great rhythm, and they try writing it out, and it's just not working for them. Well, first off, this sound like needs to be shorter, like way shorter, if you're gonna do something like that. So you need to pay attention to things like volume, things that you would not generally associate with it. And if we go into our piano roll, if you don't know what this is, go watch my FL, how to make your first song in FL 12. That'll get you started. But you may want something. Oh, there are my notes. Okay. So I'm not going to explain this, but it's the same thing with the grid, just like over here. And so we see that we've got these on our beat, and something that could make a big difference. So we have this. Maybe we want to boop dot pop like that, and so we could put a note right there, and let's make this shorter. Okay. And so what we could do is we could bring the velocity down, and we could create a dynamic hat line like that. So we could go like this. So velocity plays a big role, just something to be aware of. I'm not going for like the most amazing samples in the world. So that's a really common thing. And then usually you'll have your snare to emphasize beat 3. So that's another really common thing. And people will generally go boop, do do do, or something like that. Boo, do do do. Stuff like that. So they'll put things right in front of the beat. And something else that they'll do is they'll go in. So I'm on my kick pattern right now. And if you hold down Alt and drag, you can move it, and you could put it like right in front and make it softer. And that's another really common thing, especially with like snares and things like that. So that was a little quick. We're going to come out here. So you can hear it go do-do. And that's another thing that people do. Let's add a synthesizer. We're just going to add like a OX3, whatever, the 3 oscillator plugin. And we're going to go to a new pattern. And so that's your generals. Another for your drums. I'm not really going to go too much farther in that. Then you have your oscillator. So I'm going to back up real fast. While you're writing out all these parts, they're all going to have emphases on different parts of the beat, but you generally want to keep them on whatever your type of music is. So like salsa has its own deal, the waltz has its own deal, and that's in 3/4, and they all have their own like kind of setup with how things best work. And beats get pretty tricky. So we're gonna write something here with this 3 times oscillator, and this is more about just seeing what you want to do. So the vision is again the most important part, but this is a tonal thing. So we've got something like that going on, and I'm not going to talk about music theory, so we're just going to write a melody line. And let's take a look here, and let's make this longer. So right now we're moving at a pretty slow tempo. I'm not sure what kind of, so you'll see here that here's our 2, so this is our measure. So let's make some sort of a rhythm, and we're going to do something Okay, if we do this, this is a really common thing that happens every other, and they'll usually use it with big chords. So that's something that's pretty common. That's leaving the beat, so it gives your ears sort of like a whoa. It's also called borrowed time. I'm not going to go into triplets. Geez, I did not realize how much there was to talk about. Okay, so we're going to talk about some basic rules. So first off, when you're writing a line, you need to know your tonal limit. So if you don't have any knowledge about music theory, you're going to struggle here. But again, velocity plays a big role in perceived rhythm. And so we could have something that hits every beat, something kind of boring. And that could be kind of cool. Velocity could again play a cool role here. We could have something that goes boop, 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 boop. And right now these are our 16th notes. So that should be noted. So that might be like, well, that's way too fast. Well, you could do them in eighth notes, which would be easy enough. You just drop down one every beat, grab them and pull them down an octave. And we have our typical beat. Now in ragtime, like the Entertainer or the Maple Leaf Rag. If you do not know what ragtime is, you need to go look up the Maple Leaf Rag by Scott Joplin right now. Okay, now that you've done that, let's talk about that real quick. The cool thing about ragtime is they go off the beat. So writing something like this, so some people do stuff like this. So they have like a note, and then they have some sort of a chord, and he goes down a fifth. So this is music theory, but we're not talking about that. And we're just going to make ours really simple. And so they have something like that. And then they think that if they write something, and running eighth notes is a common thing, so they'll go like something like this. And they think, oh yeah, I've written a rag. Well, no, you haven't. You've written a march. And so a march is, they have the emphasis on beats 1 and beats 2. So that's an example of getting to know the style of music you want to write for. A ragtime would focus on the offbeats, the upbeats. And there was actually doctors, because Scott Joplin was a black guy writing really popular music at the time. And his whole life, he wasn't like mega super successful, but the Maple Leaf Rag basically gave him his living. And he's really cool. His whole story is really, really cool. But doctors would actually say like, hey, this isn't healthy because your heart will get messed up. Like they just like back then, they just said weird crap. Like they didn't know at the time. So, but what Scott did was he would go and put them on the offbeats. And so that is a rag. And so you could do something like this. I'm throwing in harmonies because I like that type of thing. And obviously that doesn't fit that great right there. But now it is a rag. And we could even have something like, and he would often tie things over. If you know sheet music, I think rhythm just comes easier personally. So different types of rhythms that use offbeats. And as you see, we get a lot of interesting results. This is not the best example, but it is a example of just sort of ideas. I'm trying to cover mostly ideas here. So now let's talk about, so next time you're writing your big synth lead, the rhythm might not actually be all that complicated. You might now be realizing that it's more about the sound design and the harmony, because a lot of people do stuff like this. Let me open up. Well, no, it would take too long to load. I have a track I'm working on right now that's got quite a bit of rhythm. Now let's load it up. Okay, let's load this sucker up. And I'm working on this right now. It's not a finished piece of work, but I do have what I consider to be a rather good example of a tonal part. It's got sort of a jazzy feel to it. So here we go. You got to give it time for the piano to load up. Give it time for my computer to catch up to speed. There we go. All right, let's open up the piano. So I've got this part way over yonder. This guy which I really like. And it's got these rhythmic piano going on, and it's hitting the off beats, that rhythm I showed you earlier, with a full measure. And of course I've got harmonies and all sorts of things going on. And this bottom line is the left hand. This top line is the right hand. And it's playing the melody. And as you can see, the melody is emphasizing the 16th pattern. And I have a little 30-second woohoo right here. Or yeah. And again, so that's sort of a thing that's going on. So this is a pretty fast-paced thing. And you see here I take advantage of borrowed time. I leave the grid. So listen for that moment. And of course, this is consistently leaving the grid, but it really fits quite well. So listen for this moment as an example of good borrowed time. And I happen to be a piano player, and I actually wrote this in. I prefer to write my piano parts in because I find that when I play them in, it's just all sorts of crazy and a mess. And so I like doing it this way. So there may be delay from the piano loading up, but I'm going to play it and hope it just works out. Nope. There it goes. I'm going to have to play through it once to let it load everything, and then it will play smooth. So you can hear it sort of do its thing, and right here it's got that nice little like emphasized note, and I do a little bit with velocity. You'll notice the velocity is pretty high up on most of these. And these guys are a bit softer, and I vary the velocity, so like dun dun dun, because the piano player would not hit that, at the same loudness every time. So that's a common thing. Now this is a rather advanced thing here, because I've got rhythm and I've got harmonies going on at the same time. So that's pretty advanced. But if we go over here to something like this, and again, I'm using a lot of contacts, so might take a while to load up everything. But I have this is called an arpeggiator. And it's a pretty common thing, and it's going up, do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, and it's just going through the chord progression. And then all these other things, so I have some strings and some pads, mostly pads, that are emphasizing beats 2 and 3, and I'm emphasizing a chord progression as I go. So the rhythm is backing the chords. So you can hear that going on. So that is a thing that is also extraordinarily common, especially if you're going for that big sort of dramatic feel, like right here. Obviously, I'm kind of going for something similar to that. So this is an example of harmony working together with chords to really come together to make one great whole. And I know I haven't really made anything recently where I'm doing a full track in front of you guys, and that's just because it's just easier for me to work by myself, where I can try things and just go at it and hack at it till I get something I like. Here's the very first thing I wrote in this track, actually, and it is a guitar, and it's, a plucked guitar, and it's just a simple chord progression. Actually, it's not really even a chord progression. It's just one chord with some varied rhythm. And the thing that makes it interesting is that, as you can see, this rhythm right here is a little funky because it's not on the grid, but that's sort of a thing in this track, and I introduced it right at the beginning. Sometimes rhythmic ideas are more accepted if they're accepted, you introduce them right at the beginning to show them this is going to be a theme in my track, this is going to be a rhythm I use. And then I have the eighth note runs, which is a thing that you'll probably use in almost every track you do ever. But maybe you're going to now go and write a track that has nothing to do with eighth note rhythms. It'll be a really unique track. So this is what this sounds like. And the thing that makes it interesting is the tonal movement. So you see, I've got that going on, and another guitar actually comes in, and it reinforces the chord progression as well as adds rhythm. So you can see I add in a note right here, giving emphasis, and just things like that. So these are things you just listen for. Whoops, that's the ARP. I don't want the ARP quite yet, so we're going to come over here. So you can hear Tuna sing. And that whoosh thing is this over here. But anyways, hopefully you get some ideas of that. So now let's go do an example of what I said of more of a drop type deal, where you have, and symbolic actually is a great example of this. Save changes. Nope. So this is an example of, because when I was starting out, I was very classical. I actually started writing classical first. So I always thought it was about how the notes were written and the chords. I did not pay attention to sound. Now I'm like that was years ago. So now I clearly understand that how sound design influences it. And it's still the idea of emphasizing rhythms, but instead of writing notes, now you're creating, and now this is very straightforward. Now you're creating straight up filter movement that matches it. So I have a patch here on a harmer, and it is just ripping it on this. I have resonance being automated on and off, and it is just ripping it right here. I don't even know how loud this is going to be, so I'm going to turn it down. So, oh, my volume just went right back up. Oh, well, it's not that loud. And I have your volume turned down anyways. And then I have this crazy resampled thing. So it just sounds nuts. And I believe I'm doing even more processing to it. But this is all the sound design. As you can see right here, I take pieces of that to create a rhythm. So that is another example of, gosh dang it. I never have this problem when I'm not recording. Only when, maybe that's what it is. Something about recording using computer resources. I don't even know. So anyways, that's a thing. And you can see I have an ARP, really basic, and it looks like chords, but just listen to it. So therefore it's an ARP. So that's a thing I'm doing. And all these rhythms come together with my drums, which as you can see here, I'm emphasizing beats 1, and then it repeats beats 1, and then I add that do-do type thing going on right there. So I'm adding that in right there. And so this creates the rhythm. This is what I'm talking about. So it's basically like I wrote a little riff. It's like first beat, nothing. Then I emphasize every 16th note. Then I go half note. So these are eighth notes. And then I go another eighth note, but this eighth note holds out. So it's almost like a dotted eighth note or whatever. I don't know. And it creates a rhythm. And there was a point where I used to label my drops because I was having a hard time writing good drops. And of course, when you're first starting. So what I would do is I'd label this A, and I'd have 4 bars, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I would create a rhythm that emphasizes certain beats because I noticed that. So I have my drums going, and I know that I need some sort of a big rip. And then something to complement that rip, like another rhythm that would, sort of fit well with that one. So when I made this, I had already written it in the tempo. So that do is like doing this again, only with a different sound and different rhythmic effects. And as you can see, this is one phrase. So. Whoops, sorry about that. That's another thing of me just clicking at the wrong time. And then I come over here, and this is a really simple rhythmic thing. So I have 3 bars of some sort of a theme with a variation, and then I have a fill. And so this is real simple. This is just a repeating rhythm. And so that is the thing that happens. It's just really cool, really dynamic because of the insane amount of sound design going on. Holy cow, what is going on? Yeah, that is just the most annoying thing ever. Anyway, so that's the thing that's happening. So hopefully you have some ideas for some rhythmic content that you're interested in making. I gave quite a few examples. You can see it doesn't need to be that complicated, but filter movements and sound design usually need to be a bit more intense, or textures. You need to layer things. You've seen some basic drum patterns. You've seen some basic melodies. You've seen some more advanced melodies, and you've seen completed drops. I happen to think this is interesting, and you see how it all focuses on particular beats. I don't think I have anything on this computer yet that really focuses on some sort of a different type of beat. I usually stick to the 1-3 just because I like that. But I have written stuff that focuses on like 3-4, maybe a waltz or 6-8 or something weird like that. But it's all pretty self-explanatory. Rhythm is one of those things that it gets added unto you as you learn additional techniques. Like it'll make more sense as you see it. But don't be afraid to get off the grid and do like weird crap. Like I will do weird crap all the time, As you can see, this, at least I consider this to be pretty weird. Like, that's like out there. And when I made it, as you can see, I clearly did not have this in mind at that time. So that is the benefits of going out there and just going for it. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Maybe something you wish you had seen that wasn't covered in this video, or a particular aspect that you wish was covered in more detail. Subscribe because you're a blessed person, and have a blessed day. That's where we'll be, not told.